You've done a lot of coaching.
Yes.
I had a couple people want to know, do you still do that?
Uh, I do. I do. I do.
Okay. So if they want to get with you, they can call you at your number 813-586-1332.
They can.
Okay. Well, good morning to you with your smiley face. And I got to get some tail.
Yes. Yes. And I'm going to do my best to not have him sit on me since I'm wearing navy blue and he sheds white. So I'm going to do my best to keep him
No,
out of the
no, no.
picture.
The cat is fine. I think my
Oh
pastor
no, the cat
might
is
have just had a
fine,
heart attack.
except that then I just have to change my shirt. So I'm going to do my best to keep him out of the picture. I don't know that I'll succeed, but we'll try.
Well, listen, anybody who's a cat lover can be on the show anytime. Um, we get so many new people every week, actually. So I hate to keep asking you this, but tell people about yourself and your firm.
Okay. Well, let's see. I could give you the day. I could give you the years and the day, but I won't. But I graduated from law school in 2015 on May 16th. So anybody who does numbers, they can work those numbers. And then I passed the bar. Well, I took the bar in July of 2015. I passed it, which was a blessing. And I got sworn in October of 2015. I've been practicing for about 7.5 years. Uh, I do estate planning because it's a great way to be of service. To your question about coaching, there is a good bit of coaching involved in it, in helping people make choices that they're struggling to make. Um, and the difference between coaching and law, which I get stopped on in coaching, it's easier to say to you, Steve, do you really want to do that? Or in law, it's more like you might want to give that a little more thought. So those are a different tack, but there is coaching involved. I don't ever want to be in court, which is one reason I chose estate planning. There's never reason court if it's done correctly, and nobody's yelling at you for doing the wrong thing, which hasn't happened, and I assume will not happen. But the biggest reason is, as I've said before, but it always bears repeating, is I thought about law school when I was younger, and it was never the right time. And in 2008, God told me to go to law school, which was startling to say the least. And but now was the right time. So actually, on August 22nd, it'll be 12 years since I started law school, and it was four glorious years. It wasn't easy. It wasn't that I graduated, cum laude or summa cum laude, whatever the top one is. But um, I loved the learning, and I appreciated being pretty much the oldest person in the world by birth certificates, because I wasn't there to build a 40-year career or start a clerkship or work with a judge. I was there to learn and have fun. And I had both. I learned and I had fun.
So we can say the Lord touched your heart.
Yeah, actually, he smacked me across the head. But yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, but whatever, however, you want to put it. I mean, it was pretty startling. It wasn't this cat, but the cat that was with me 14 years ago. She wasn't even in the room, so he couldn't be talking to anybody but me. And he did give me an out when I asked when, and he said, "Get ready." And that, I didn't know what that meant, but I did it. It took 32 months by the time I started. It was time well spent. It was a great learning experience, because you really learn that anything you want to do, you'll find time to do, and it just goes into your schedule. So that's where it started.
How long ago did you start thinking about this before you actually went to law school?
Well, let's see. The first time I was going to go to law school, I got accepted about 72 hours before classes started, and I just couldn't figure out how to work out the logistics, so I didn't go. Actually, I thought that was that wasn't terribly unreasonable. The second time I thought about going to law school, I spoke to somebody and said, "Do I have to take contracts and torts?" And they said, "Yes." I went, "Well, then I'm not going to law school," because I was older. The third time I thought about it, I did not. I went to Stetson here in South St. Petersburg and Florida, and I honestly didn't see them online. So the only part-time law school I found was all online and would only allow me to practice in California, which I wasn't moving to California, so that was impractical. Plus, it was going to be $130,000, and it was all online, and I had no interest in that. So the fourth time is when it was the right time. I mean, it was the right time. You know, God, He waited till the right time, and He said, "Go to law
Yes.
school," and I listened, and I went, and it really was. It really was glorious. Again, not easy. Wasn't the top of the class. Thanked him for curves for grades, for 2 or 3 classes. But I went with the promise. This is a good thing for people to think about just in their lives. I went with a promise to never leave anything on the table. So I never went to a class or a test or prep without knowing I'd given it everything I could. Didn't mean I got A's or whatever, but it meant that I never walked out of a test or a room knowing I hadn't given it my best. And that was a promise I made before I started. I wasn't going to leave anything on the table. So I didn't.
Oh my gosh. I'm in a hotel today and looks like a fire alarm is going off.
That's okay.
Of all times, it should go off any minute.
Or they'll come knocking on the door that you have to leave.
Yeah, no, this has happened 3 times now.
Don't worry.
Oh my gosh.
Just play around it. Yes.
What I want to say is that what's so amazing about your story is I have run into so many people over the years that said, "Gosh, I wish I'd have gone to law school." And sometimes I would say to them, "Why don't you go?" "Oh no, I'm too old in life." And you actually did it. And
Yes.
that's what makes your story so amazing.
I did it. Actually, I have somebody sent me a Facebook Messenger about how amazing, like I was their hero. The thing for people who say that to me, I say, well, you're not too old, so don't use that. You got to find a better excuse than you're too old. But the thing that I learned that's very humbling is I know 3 people who went back to postgraduate work, master's degrees, PhDs, law school, based upon the fact that I did it. And I didn't do it with the idea of inspiring anybody. And I'm very humbled by the fact that it was an inspiration. I also got that people told me how courageous I was. It never occurred to me as courageous. It still doesn't occur to me as courageous because it was a walk of faith. But I learned to stand in their shoes and go, yeah, I can get from your point of view, I can get where this was really courageous. So, for anybody who wants any kind of higher education or whatever, or learning, if you're working for somebody and you're waiting for them to send you to whatever it is, finish your BA, whatever. I used to coach. You're self-employed regardless of whether you're getting a salary. And if you want to do something, then find a way to do it. And if you're not going to do it, don't make yourself crazy because you're not going to do it.
Wow. Well, let's get into the gut of the show because you know what? There are so many people who we just assume like know what a trust is, know what a will is, what a trustee is, but they really don't. And so I wanted to use today's show to, and again, I apologize for the bell going off, but I want to talk, for example, which minor children, when they're involved, what is better, a trust or a will?
Well, I'm sure there's a variety of opinion. I've come to the point of view that if you've got minor children, and I'm talking about, but you come to me when they're 16 or so, even then, to trust, because most people would not have trusted themselves with the equivalent of $50 when they were children. I've
Right.
met some who would. I wouldn't have. Okay, but and you don't necessarily want children to inherit substantial amounts of money when they're 18 years old. My nephew was just recently telling me, he lives in Colorado, so I can't help him with this, but he's doing a trust, and he says, I'm thinking I can give full distributions at 25. I said, well, here's the thing. You know your kids and you'll know them better, but 25 still sounds pretty young. So what a trust does with minor children is it allows you to set up a model whereby children will get certain monies when they reach certain ages, and you have somebody managing the money because they can't inherit till they're 18. So you choose somebody you really trust who's going to raise them and spend money the way you would, and you outline what they want. So for families, I just signed a new client last week who's got an 11-year-old and a 3-year-old, and we've been talking for 4 years, and he finally broke down and hired me. But because they have minor children, they really need the trust. They will have, I don't know that they'll be millionaires, but I'm not saying they won't. They're not now. They might be, when they die, but nobody knows how old they'll be and how old their children would be.
Right.
The other reason for trust, even with if you've got a child who you already know is a special needs child, you've got a child with autism, you've got a child with some kind of physical impairment, you need a trust so that if they need to qualify for government benefits, you've set up a vehicle by which they can do it or keep that. We probably all know people who have young children who are already on Medicaid because of their physical, right? So you have to have a vehicle that maintains that benefit when these children reach adulthood, young adulthood, older adulthood, so that they don't risk losing those benefits even for a month. So that's another reason for a trust. Trusts are a good, well, certainly with the minor children, same idea. If you have a disabled spouse who might need a special needs trust, if you don't have minor children, but right now I've got a client who did a trust because her husband has dementia, and we needed to create in her trust special needs so that when she dies, the money goes into this special needs trust and he can qualify for government benefits if need be. So there are lots of reasons. If you don't have a lot of assets, you don't have young children, or you have responsible adult children. In Florida, you can do it all with beneficiary designations and a particular type of deed that passes your home onto somebody else. It depends. First thing I learned in law school from my civil procedure, when you get asked a question, just tell people it depends. But the one about minor children, trusts, I advise trusts when you've got minor children.
What does a trustee actually do?
Trustee is the one who gathers all the assets to be managed by the trust and then manages the distribution of the assets, whatever they be. So they would sell a home to help fund a trust for the children, let's say, okay? And then they manage how those get distributed. So right now I've got a couple where, I've got one where when the woman dies, because her husband's predeceased her, when she dies, two of her daughters will get a third of all the assets immediately. One of her daughters will get a certain amount per month for 5 years, and then the rest, because that daughter has not been responsible with money. So the trustee does that. They see that all that happens, and you have to set up a special bank account. It's a trust account. You have to file a tax return for it every year, or at least pay attention to what it earns. So it's depending upon the asset, the dollar value. It's not a difficult job, but there are definitely responsibilities that go along with being a trustee.
We had your last show, and I asked him to call back today.
Okay.
And we're still kind of waiting. He had a question. He said, I love listening to your show, but I don't have a lot of assets. Should I still sit down with Attorney Baker? And I said, of course you should, but why don't you call the show and ask that question? Because when people think estate planning, they think estate, You
Right.
got to have millions of dollars, and that's just not right.
No. Um, People find it hard, and I can appreciate this. They find it hard to get around that it's not a lot of money. So for the person, should they call back or not? Here's my answer to the question. If you have a bank account, with even a few $100s in it, you need a power of attorney because you need somebody to be able to get to that money should they need it. And people say, well, what are they going to do with $500? I said, well, I have no idea, but it might pay your utility bills for 3 months if need be, or something like that. If you if you pass, it's no longer valid, but it might pay utility bills for 3 months. So that might be interested. You need a will because if you die, when you die, because we'll all die, when you die, if you have anything that you have not effectively designated to go to somebody, you have to go through probate. And you want something in place before the fact where somebody's been designated the representative of the estate, the executor, the personal representative. It depends upon your state. You need a healthcare surrogate because you want somebody to be able to make healthcare decisions for you if you can't. When people are married, the spouse can generally step in. I still think you need a document. But if you're single or you're living in a committed relationship without marriage, then you need to have that in place saying, Joe can act for me, because the hospitals, the doctors, they need somebody named. And you need a living will, which is about your end of life. So people call me often to this person's question. They call and say, I have a living will. What else do I need? Well, a living will, they mean what they want to have done at their end of life. They don't mean a last will and testament. The other reason for the last will and testament, which I've learned, I haven't experienced it, but I've seen, is if you don't have it and you die as a result of a car accident or something like that, or medical malpractice or something really horrific that you can't imagine, and it happens, you need a vehicle to collect the assets. So right now, people who have Camp Lejeune cases, whatever that is, are being told to form a trust, because if the case doesn't get, or at least get a will, because if the case doesn't get settled before they pass, they'll at least have established a vehicle and a person responsible for collecting the proceeds. So it's reasonably morbid.
Probate's very expensive.
Probate is very expensive, but the other thing is, and I've said this here, if you hate your family, don't do it. You don't do it for yourself. You do it for your family. I mean, there's enough grief to go around. Grief, guilt, whatever. There's enough stuff going around when somebody dies without putting legal challenges on top of what's already happening. If you've got it in place and you leave, we talked about the green box, last month, and you leave the way for people to find out what to do, it's just easier. It's just easier. And avoidance, denial, I mean, all those are perfectly understandable human attributes. But do you really want to do that to the people you love the most because you were too afraid? I mean, I've told you the third biggest reason for not doing it. The first is what the gentleman called to the woman, I don't have anything. The second is it's too expensive when they've never checked it out. And the third is they'll die as soon as they do it. Well, I mean, I don't know how to get around that one, other than you're going to die anyway. So why not do it? But yes. So the person who called, if they're listening, whatever, at 1 second after midnight on your 18th birthday, you need it. Because at 1 second after midnight on your 18th birthday, your parents can no longer do anything for you without your permission.
Debbie, what do you say to a family member who wants to contest a will?
Well, first thing I say is, I don't do that. I don't do that. So I will happy to refer you to somebody. And I say it'll be expensive because that's purely hourly retainer based, because there's no guarantees. that it will fly. I don't know that I say a lot more than that because I know I'm not going to do it.
Right.
I might ask them, what has you think that you want to do that? And sometimes, people, it hasn't happened often. People will say, well, I know my uncle Steve was going to leave me something.
Thanks,
And
Debbie.
I know in one will he did, because he named me as he included me in the group called niece. Okay. But when he did his next will, he named everybody and didn't name me. And I'm convinced his daughter exerted undue influence to leave me out. Well, that may be true. How are you going to prove that? So again, I go back to, I'm not saying you don't contest it. I'm saying you want to think about it, because any attorney you call who might take this, you're looking at minimum, $5,000-6,000 off the bat to get started. And I'm not saying don't. People say it's the principle of the thing. I go, I'm not arguing about the principle of the thing. You just have to decide whether it's worth your emotional energy. And a couple of people have decided it's not, because it's that I've talked to. So it's like it's not going to be worth 2 years of my time, unknown amounts of money, with no guarantee of an outcome. I have one client who did take it to litigation because an insurance company had paid her niece incorrectly because she'd been named. And I just said, but I don't do this. So she won, took a year and a half. She won, and she got all her money. I think the niece had to wind up paying all her legal fees.
Wow.
So that was worth it. And it was what her mother wanted. So she was going to follow it through to the end. That made sense, because her mother didn't get what she wanted. But I recommend people, I don't do it. I'll refer you to people who love to do it. You have to think about the emotional cost.
I heard a commercial the other day on TV, and it reminded me of a friend of mine that did one of these simple wills that you buy at the store. And I got to tell you, he had so many problems with that will trying to do it himself. And what do you tell people who say, I can just do my will myself?
I say you're right, but don't. And I
Okay, you got to
and I
explain.
and I said, and if you're going to download forms, find an attorney that you trust and pay them to review them before you execute them. For just what you're describing, Steve, whatever the specifics were about, you can't know that they're state specific. I mean, I had a lesson kind of in online. I have a client who did an online form for forming her LLC, her business entity. And I ran it by my colleague to review, because I think it had everything in there that we need versus her paying um, to a new one. And what my colleague said is best practice is you do not even review online documents, especially this kind of thing, because you have no idea who wrote them. You have no idea if they were written by lawyers. So going back to what I said about, if you're going to do it, have an attorney review it. That would be a friend of yours who's an attorney who's willing to review it, because if they put their, what's it called, imprimatur, if they stamp it,
Yes.
you've effectively left them open for some kind of lawsuit, however unintentionally. So I don't recommend. I mean, I would refer people to one of the um, subscription legal services. There were several where at
But
least
his
they're done by
his
attorneys.
was just trying to save money, but he said it ended up costing him so much more in the long run.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I get it. I mean, I really do get it. And I referred many a person to prepaid legal services, whatever they call it now, identity theft, because they're all attorneys. They're in 50 states. They do basic planning documents. I've had people who truly have no money. I mean, they have no money, but they can afford to join and get a lawyer to draft them and do them and have them executed correctly, and then they have something in place, and it's legal. It's compliant with whatever state you're in. That's the word. Whether you're in Tennessee or Kentucky or whatever, it would adhere to those rules, and you can be pretty secure that it'll. They don't do customized, but they do basic documents that you could take to your doctor or to your personal representative and do it. Doing them on yourself is real risky. Tempting, but risky.
Well, we're coming to the end of the show, and this is probably my favorite question to always ask you. Because first of all, I know you're going to be totally honest, and I think you're one of the finest attorneys for many reasons when it comes to estate planning. Why should somebody retain your services?
Gosh. Well, let's see. So as not to repeat what I said last month for those who've seen this before, let's see. What would I tell you this month for why somebody should retain me?
Well, we've got so many new people who tune in, who find the show.
Okay. So last month, what I told you was because I make the process fun. Because when we take ourselves too seriously, we're in trouble when you're taking yourself too seriously. I think, I don't know that so I don't know that any other attorney would tell you they make it fun, but I'm always willing to learn something I don't know. So if you ask me a question about like forming a business entity or how do I appoint guardians for my minor children or whatever, and you ask me something that I don't know, I'm going to find out and I'm going to get you counsel from people who work in that area or have experienced that area. And also when I make a mistake in terms of counsel, I'll be happy to call you back and say, you know what I told you last week? I've learned that I wasn't correct. So we're gonna recant, and we're gonna either recreate a document or change a document we were working on because I had given you bad information. I've heard that that's really unusual. I don't know that, but I've heard that being able to allow that, whoops, let's try that again. It's not common in the world of
Can I tell you my thoughts?
Sure.
Because we've been working for well over a year, and the one thing that comes to my mind about attorney Debbie Baker is you really do care. And when it comes to estate planning, that is so important because you're dealing with so many different people, kids, adults, and it just, for the area that you've chosen to be in, estate planning, God could not have chosen anybody any better than you. I just want to tell you that. Yeah.
Thanks.
First of all, well, you deserve it. I mean, because you really do care. And, I love where your heart is with the Lord. I think that's amazing. I want people to know, the ones who are listening on radio have not been able to see the scroll that's going below on the TV version. So let's give everybody your phone number first.
Okay. So the phone number is 813-586-1332. It's London Baker Law. It's londonbakerlaw.com if you want to look online. I look just like the picture on the website. I've been told I look just like the picture on the website. And I don't care what state you're in, or if you call, I will talk to you. There is no charge for for that. It's part of the service. If I can help you make a choice, move forward, decide not to move forward, it's an honor and a privilege, and I'll be happy to have a conversation.